US President Donald Trump, in an executive order signed on Monday, paused enforcement of a federal law of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Mangala Talkies. This is going to be a very, very short update, but I thought I should make a record of this update. So, because I made an entry in my journal about this, and which is when I thought, why not record a video about this? I'll leave it to the producers whether they want to release this video or not. I thought this is an important development, and I'm going to make again few associations. Hopefully, you will find this development as important as I think it is. You must have seen on the internet, like Donald Trump has been kind of making these big signatures in the menu book like paper. So those are executive orders. Basically, those are presidential orders which he is making so that he wants to enforce, he wants to enact something quickly, but it is going to be for very short term. So that is what the executive order does. That means you're not passing a law, you're not passing an act, but you are passing an executive order, which has a shorter life, usually 90 days. Few hours ago, he signed an order to, so presidential action, pausing Foreign Corrupt Practices Act enforcement to further American economic and national security. Okay, so the name of the law is Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. EO, executive order, was signed to pause this act, enforcement of this act. Enforcement of this act now is limited only to trafficking, human trafficking and narcotics. Now I'll come to why I think this development is important. This development FCPA Act aims at acting against the American entities which are liable of bribery charge outside of US. So if there is an American CEO, if he is liable of a bribery charge, say in India, then in that case, FCPA will take charge of it. Then FCPA becomes enforceable in that case. So Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So it has got a huge reach. So the act of bribery need not be committed only in states. Act of bribery could be committed anywhere in the world, but then still they would be liable to under FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now, this act, obviously, Americans were very proud of this act because this ensured great corporate governance. They also, using their influence in last few years, they tried to introduce this sort of law in UK and Canada. So these are two laws that I am aware of, but then I'm sure there are a few others in the world which were influenced by FCPA. So FCPA ensures good corporate governance. One can argue against it. One can argue that this in fact puts shackles on your competitiveness because not every other country has this law. Some of the countries do have this law. So which is why the American business community was always against this. They always thought that this is anti-competitive. So this is restrictive. This doesn't let them compete in the world market. Which is why Donald Trump has put a pause on the enforcement of FCPA. Now, FCPA, Trump, in his first term also never liked FCPA. So in his first term, Donald Trump was always alleged that he looked the other way when there was a matter of enforcement of FCPA. Up to this point, I think you know how important this act is, especially for the business community. Trump has put a pause on it. Now, the association that I would like to make is this. I'm going to read something to you. Gautam Adani, chairman of Adani Group, was indicted in November 2024 by US prosecutors for alleged involvement in a bribery scheme. US authorities have accused Adani and his nephew, Sagar Adani, and 6 others of $265 million bribery and fraud scheme. Prosecutors allege that they bribed Indian government officials to secure solar energy contracts, generating $2 billion in profit over 2 decades. Now this is the most important part. SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, has charged Adani and others under Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The indictment was filed in US District Court for Eastern District of New York. So, Adani is also charged, not charged, but there is a case, there is an investigation open under FCPA. So, if now the enforcement of FCPA is paused, so that means this should benefit Gautam Adani and his group. That is how I would interpret this, and which is why I thought this is an interesting development. We know how important now Gautam Adani has become, for better or worse, for the Indian economy. So any development with this court case would have had direct impact on the Indian market and potentially your mutual fund portfolio. So which is why I thought this association is important. We don't know what is going to happen to FCPA in long run, but at least in the short run, they are going to pause the enforcement under FCPA. At this point, I must share my personal tryst with FCPA. How I learned about FCPA. Many moons ago, I worked for an American company. Briefly, but I worked for an American company where I reported to an American. So I had an American boss. And I was working in accounting, and where we needed to do few accounting adjustments. And not only that, we needed to explain those adjustments to another American group. Which is when I was struggling with it, because I'm not trained, at that time at least, I was not trained on the American accounting. And which is when I suggested my boss that, can I buy few books on US GAAP? I think if I get to go to like a source material, I can very easily answer these questions quite confidently. Like, my boss liked this idea. He was very encouraging. He was a great boss. He said, yeah, go ahead, buy it. Problem was that none of these books were available at that time in Pune. So these books needed to be ordered from an agent, which is when my boss had cold feet. He said, no, I am not paying any agent. I am not paying anyone cash. Which is when he cited FCPA. He said, I don't want any FCPA trouble in my world. So what he did for me is that he asked someone, one of his colleagues, back in States, to buy few books and send it to me. So it was 10 times expensive overall, but still that was the fear FCPA had in people's mind. Now that law is going to get paused. Let's see what happens next. It is an interesting development. Remember, Adani is charged. So there is an investigation open under FCPA, which is now paused. Thank you very much.